August 6, 1945, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Helen Hall steps off her shift at the Y-12 plant at 7:45 in the morning, exhausted from 8 hours adjusting dials and monitoring gauges. She's done this same monotonous work, watch the needle, turn the knob, keep the meter centered, every day for 18 months without understanding why. The morning air carries the industrial smell she's grown used to, metallic, chemical, slightly acrid. She walks past rows of identical prefabricated houses, their flat roofs and beige walls still damp from last night's rain. At Tennessee Avenue, the newspaper headline stops her mid-stride. Atomic bomb rocks Japan. This can't be real. We made that? The article explains that an atomic weapon fueled by enriched uranium-235 has obliterated Hiroshima. The uranium came from Oak Ridge, from her Y-12 plant, from those dials she's been adjusting. Helen's hands shake as she reads. The weapon required uranium-235 separated atom by atom from uranium-238 through electromagnetic processes. Y-12, her plant. Those massive racetracks of equipment she's never fully understood. Calutrons, the article calls them. The article describes the world's largest building. That must be K25, the mile-long U-shaped structure where her friend Colleen tests pipes. For 18 months, she's lived in a city that didn't officially exist, a city of 75,000 people built from nothing on 59,000 acres of Tennessee farmland. A city with schools where teachers taught children never to ask what their parents did at work, theaters that showed Hollywood films to crowds whose addresses didn't exist on any map, churches for 17 denominations where preachers prayed for victory without mentioning the means, and 3 massive industrial plants whose purpose remained classified. A city surrounded by fences and guard towers where propaganda posters warned constantly, what you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. She remembers orientation, the security oath, the warnings. A girl named Dorothy had asked too many questions during her second week, wondered aloud what element they were processing. Dorothy vanished overnight, her bed stripped by morning. No explanation, just gone. Everyone assumed they were making something for the war effort, ammunition maybe, chemical weapons, artillery shells, something conventional, something comprehensible. Not this, not the most destructive weapon in human history. The news spreads through Oak Ridge like wildfire. Workers pour from dormitories, gathering in clusters on muddy streets, reading newspapers, talking in hushed, awed voices. The Calutron girls from Y-12, the leak detectors from K-25, the construction workers from S-50. Suddenly understanding. The scale staggers comprehension. This wasn't a laboratory or a factory. This was a metropolis. 5th largest city in Tennessee by 1945, built in complete secrecy. The government had acquired nearly 60,000 acres, evicted thousands of families, constructed an entire functioning city in less than 2 years. No public announcements, no permits, no maps. And it worked. They hid an entire metropolis to build the ultimate weapon. If you're amazed that 75,000 people kept this secret, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. But the true genius was how they made the pieces fit. The little boy bomb contained uranium-235 enriched through an integrated system. S-50's thermal diffusion provided initial enrichment, K-25's gaseous diffusion increased concentration, Y-12's electromagnetic separation achieved weapons-grade purity. 3 different technologies working in coordinated secrecy. Now 75,000 people know what they built. September 17, 1942. Brigadier General Leslie R. Groves receives assignment to command the Manhattan Engineer District, the secret program to build atomic weapons before Germany can. Groves is a career Army engineer who just finished constructing the Pentagon, then the world's largest office building. He understands large-scale projects. He understands logistics. He understands that wars are won not just by superior technology, but by superior production capacity. He also understands urgency. Intelligence reports suggest German scientists are pursuing atomic weapons. Werner Heisenberg, Otto Hahn, some of the greatest minds in physics now working for the Third Reich. The race is on, and America is behind. 2 days into command, September 19, 1942, Groves makes a decision that will reshape warfare. Standing near Elza, Tennessee, surveying ridges and valleys along the Clinch River, 20 miles west of Knoxville, he approves acquisition of approximately 59,000 acres for the Clinton Engineer Works. The site meets every requirement, remote enough for security yet accessible by rail and highway. The recently completed Norris Dam provides massive hydroelectric power, critical for the electricity-hungry processes he knows are coming. Ridges separate potential plant sites. If one explodes, others survive. The topography itself provides natural compartmentalization. And crucially, Depression-era Tennessee land costs just $46.86 per acre on average. October 1942, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers begins condemning properties. Families receive notices, evacuate within weeks. No explanation, no negotiation, no appeals. John Hendricks, a local mystic who died in 1915, had once prophesied that a city on the Clinch River would one day help end a terrible war. Now his prophecy was becoming reality, though in ways he could never have imagined. Families pack belongings. Farmers abandon fields ready for harvest. Some families had lived on this land for generations, since before the Civil War. By March 1943, every resident has been removed, every building cleared. Bulldozers level structures, fences rise, guard towers appear, gates close. What was once farmland becomes Site X. What emerges transforms wilderness into industrial infrastructure at unprecedented speed. Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill receives an impossible task: design a town for 13,000 people with almost no information about purpose. They're given aerial photographs, topographic maps, 4 days to submit plans. They're not told what will be manufactured. They're not told how many people will actually arrive. John O. Merrill moves to Tennessee to oversee construction of a city that officially doesn't exist on any map, in any census, in any directory. The scale overwhelms comprehension. Within 18 months, Oak Ridge grows to include 300 miles of roads, 55 miles of railroad track, 10 schools, 7 theaters, 17 restaurants, 13 supermarkets, a library, churches for 17 denominations. The town has its own newspaper, the Oak Ridge Journal, though censors review every word before publication. It has a symphony orchestra, a softball league. Housing arrives pre-fabricated, approximately 2,500 cemesto houses, panels of sugarcane core surfaced with asbestos cement sheets assembled like enormous puzzles. Types designated by alphabet: A for single workers, D for families, F for supervisors. The houses are supposed to be temporary, lasting maybe 5 years, but housing can't keep pace with arrivals. By summer 1944, population explodes past 50,000, nearly 4 times original plans. Trailers fill entire valleys. Wooden hutments, prefabricated 5-person huts, cluster in segregated camps. Gamble Valley accommodates 4,000 trailer spaces. Happy Valley swells from 5,000 to 15,000 residents. The mud becomes legendary, swallowing construction equipment whole, coating every shoe, marking Oak Ridge residents instantly when they venture into nearby Knoxville. Meanwhile, real construction accelerates. The industrial plants. Y-12 comes first. Ground breaks February 18, 1943 for the electromagnetic separation plant. The facility will house 1,152 Calutrons, California University cyclotrons, massive machines using powerful electromagnets to separate lighter uranium-235 atoms from heavier uranium-238. Each machine weighs hundreds of tons. The process requires extraordinary copper quantities for electromagnetic coils, but wartime demand has exhausted copper supplies. So the Manhattan Project does something unprecedented, borrows nearly 14,700 tons of silver bullion from the U.S. Treasury, silver bars from Fort Knox, and winds it into electromagnetic coils. The silver will be returned after the war, though Treasury officials note slight radioactive contamination. Tennessee Eastman Corporation manages Y-12, recruiting thousands of young women, mostly recent high school graduates from Appalachian communities, to operate the Calutrons. These Calutron girls sit at control panels, adjusting dials and monitoring meters. They don't know what they're producing. They're trained to respond to gauge movements, not ask questions. Approximately 10,000 young women are recruited between 1943 and 1945. In tests against Berkeley scientists, the women consistently outperform PhDs. When Manhattan Project deputy Kenneth Nichols compares production data, he discovers that the young hillbilly girl operators are outproducing doctorate-holding scientists. Physicist Ernest Lawrence refuses to believe it. He challenges them to a week-long production race. The girls win decisively. They follow procedures precisely. The scientists can't refrain from investigating every fluctuation, trying to understand why the needle moves. The women just keep it centered. By November 1943, Y-12 begins operation, employing 22,000 people around the clock. 11 miles southwest, K-25 rises from wilderness. Construction begins June 1943 on the gaseous diffusion plant. The challenge proves immense, creating barriers fine enough to filter uranium hexafluoride gas molecules while withstanding corrosion, then cascading through thousands of stages. The building itself defies imagination. 4 stories tall, U-shaped, stretching half a mile by 1,000 feet, 44 acres under a single roof, over 5 million square feet of floor space. When completed in early 1945, K-25 becomes the world's largest building under one roof, requiring 25,000 construction workers at peak. The structure contains over 3,000 diffusion cascade stages with hundreds of miles of pipes. Workers use bicycles to navigate the interior. At $512 million, K-25 costs more than the entire Hanford plutonium site. Groves orders K-25 construction to begin before the barrier problem is solved. By mid-1943, the massive building rises, while the scientists still search for workable barrier material. It's a calculated gamble. Bet that solution will emerge during construction. The alternative, waiting for certainty, might mean losing the race to Germany. The X-10 graphite reactor, though smaller, serves crucial pilot functions, testing plutonium production methods that will be used at Hanford. Each facility operates in isolation behind additional fences. Y-12 workers don't know about K-25. K-25 workers don't know about X-10. Workers who ask too many questions simply disappear, terminated, escorted out, never explained. By 1945, Oak Ridge consumes 1/7 of all electricity produced in the United States. Through 1943 and into 1944, 3 separate uranium enrichment approaches proceed simultaneously, racing against German atomic research. Ruth Huddleston, 19 years old, sits at her Y-12 station adjusting knobs to keep needles centered. Alpha Calutrons, 96 tanks arranged in oval racetracks, provide initial enrichment. Smaller beta Calutrons achieve final concentration. She has no idea she's separating uranium isotopes. The work is hypnotic, almost meditative. 8 hours watching gauges, 8 hours of tiny adjustments. I didn't have any idea what we were doing, Huddleston later recalls. We weren't allowed to even talk to anybody about what we were doing. All I know is they told us we were doing something to help win the war. Tennessee Eastman recruits from East Tennessee communities where opportunities beyond textile mills are rare. Y-12 jobs pay $100 a month, more than most women in the region have ever earned. The work helps the war effort. It provides independence. It offers escape from small towns where opportunities are limited. Women arrive by thousands, receive brief training, begin operating sophisticated equipment without understanding its purpose. They live in dormitories, 6 to a room. They attend dances at the recreation hall on Saturday nights. They write letters home, letters that censors read before mailing, crossing out prohibited words. They form friendships that will last decades, and they turn knobs, watch needles, keep everything centered. The secrecy protocols are absolute. Workers sign security declarations invoking the Espionage Act of 1917. Mail is censored. Phone calls are monitored. Propaganda billboards throughout Oak Ridge repeat variations of the warning. Workers who violate secrecy or simply ask too many questions receive termination notices within hours. No explanations, just escort through gates. Ed Westcott, the only authorized photographer, documents Calutron operations. His images show rows of young women at control panels, faces focused on gauges and meters. Years later, these photographs will become iconic images of the Manhattan Project, but when Westcott takes them, the women don't even know they'll be remembered. At K25, a different process unfolds. Gaseous diffusion pushes uranium hexafluoride gas through microscopic barriers, separating isotopes based on molecular weight. Lighter uranium-235 passes through barrier pores more readily than heavier uranium-238. Repeat through thousands of cascade stages and concentration gradually increases. It's elegant in theory. In practice, it's an engineering nightmare. The challenge nearly defeats the project. Engineers struggle to fabricate barriers with uniform microscopic holes, hundreds of millions per square inch, fine enough to separate molecules while withstanding corrosive uranium hexafluoride gas. The gas reacts violently with water, corrodes most metals, degrades many materials. Specifications demand extraordinary precision. Columbia University's SAM Labs, Kelix Corporation, Union Carbide all pursue solutions. Months pass without breakthrough. Groves orders K25 construction to begin before the barrier problem is solved. By mid-1943, the massive building rises while scientists still search for workable barrier material. It's a calculated gamble. Bet that solution will emerge during construction. The alternative, waiting for certainty, might mean losing the race to Germany. Colleen Black works leak detection at K25, testing endless miles of pipe for pinhole defects. She carries a detection device, walking pipe runs, checking connections. She sees massive structures, inhales chemical smells, hears industrial processes, knows nothing about purpose. The K25 building is so vast she can't comprehend its scale. She rides buses inside just to reach her workstations. Some sections remain off-limits even to her, additional clearances required. The third approach emerges from Navy research. Philip Abelson at the Naval Research Laboratory develops liquid thermal diffusion, using convection in tall columns to separate uranium isotopes. The Navy operates a small 100-column pilot plant in Philadelphia. The process is elegant in its simplicity. 3 concentric pipes, steam heat in the center, cooling water outside, uranium hexafluoride between. Light isotopes migrate to hot zones and rise, heavy isotopes sink toward cold zones. Fill the column, apply heat and cooling, wait 3 days. Separation occurs naturally through thermal convection. For Oak Ridge workers, life proceeds under constant surveillance. The city functions normally on the surface. Schools educate children, theaters show films, stores sell groceries, but security permeates everything underneath. Residents need passes to enter and exit gates. Different colored badges grant access to different areas. Army intelligence officers monitor conversations in cafeterias, recreation halls, even churches. The isolation is both physical and psychological. Oak Ridge doesn't appear on any public maps. Bus drivers traveling from Knoxville navigate by memory. No road signs point to Oak Ridge. Letters are censored before mailing. Phone calls are restricted and monitored. Workers live knowing their neighbors might be informants. Trust becomes selective. The community develops its own internal culture. Everyone understands the unspoken rules. Don't ask, don't tell. Do your job, trust that it matters. Children in Oak Ridge schools learn not to ask parents about work. Teachers avoid topics that might prompt dangerous questions. Sermons in churches carefully avoid references to atomic physics or uranium. Y-12's electromagnetic separation works but consumes vast electricity. K-25's gaseous diffusion promises efficiency but lacks workable barriers. S-50's thermal diffusion shows promise but requires massive scale-up. The residents remain unaware of what they're building. By spring 1944, uranium enrichment at Oak Ridge faces cascading crises threatening the entire Manhattan Project timeline. Y-12's electromagnetic separation, operational since November 1943, produces far less enriched uranium than required. The Calutrons experience constant technical failures. Vacuum seals leak, contaminating the chambers. Receivers contaminate from improper collection procedures. Magnetic coils overheat. Equipment breaks down daily. Production rates fall catastrophically short of projections. At current rates, Y-12 alone cannot produce enough weapons-grade uranium-235 for even a single bomb by mid-1945. Los Alamos needs material. The weapon design team is ready, but without enriched uranium, there's nothing to design with. K-25 faces worse problems. The gaseous diffusion barrier, the entire technology's foundation, still doesn't exist in production form. Engineers have been trying since 1942 to fabricate barriers with uniform microscopic holes fine enough to separate uranium molecules. Each barrier needs hundreds of millions of holes per square inch, all identical in size and spacing. The uranium hexafluoride gas proves too corrosive for many materials. Tolerances are impossibly fine. Kellex Corporation tries nickel screens. Union Carbide experiments with compressed powder. Columbia University tests sintered materials. Nothing meets specifications. Months pass without acceptable solution. May 1944. Y-12 employs 22,000 workers operating 1,152 Calutrons around the clock. K-25's mile-long building nears completion at astronomical cost, $512 million, more than the entire Manhattan Project budget for 1943. Yet neither plant produces sufficient enriched uranium. The deadline for weapons delivery to Los Alamos approaches inexorably. Intelligence reports suggest Germany might test an atomic device any month. The pressure on Groves is immense. He's spent over $1 billion on facilities that aren't producing. If Oak Ridge fails, the entire Manhattan Project fails. July 4, 1944. Independence Day. Groves convenes an emergency meeting with Oak Ridge contractors at a hotel in Knoxville. The Manhattan Project faces potential failure. Ernest Lawrence proposes expanding Y-12 again, convert existing Calutrons to multiple beam configuration, add 2 more racetracks. British scientists, having abandoned their own gaseous diffusion hopes after years of effort, endorse Lawrence's electromagnetic approach as the only proven method. Time runs out for alternatives. Then J. Robert Oppenheimer, who's been quiet during most of the meeting, suggests examining Philip Abelson's thermal diffusion work at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. It's almost an afterthought. Groves sends investigators immediately. Within days, they return with unexpected news. Abelson's liquid thermal diffusion process is operationally simple. 3 concentric pipes, steam heat, cooling water, uranium hexafluoride gas between. Light uranium-235 isotopes migrate to hot zones and rise. Heavy uranium-238 sinks. The separation per column is small, less than 1% enrichment, but the process works reliably. No vacuum seals to fail, no microscopic barriers to fabricate, no magnetic coils to overheat, just heat, cooling, and time. More importantly, construction could proceed rapidly. A thermal diffusion plant could be operational by early 1945, far faster than solving K-25's barrier problem or expanding Y-12's complex Calutron systems. And the massive steam required already exists. K-25's power plant, the largest steam electric facility in the world, sits nearly complete, idled while waiting for K-25 to solve its barrier crisis. The economics suddenly finally make sense. Use what exists, build what's simple, accept lower efficiency per stage if construction time is drastically reduced. June 26, 1944, less than a month after the Normandy invasion, Groves approves thermal diffusion plant construction. He gives H.K. Ferguson Company exactly 90 days, half the optimistically estimated time necessary, to build a facility with 2,142 thermal diffusion columns, each 48 feet tall. For comparison, Abelson's Philadelphia pilot plant has only 100 columns. This will be 20 times larger. 21 engineering firms refuse the contract before H.K. Ferguson accepts. The deadline seems impossible. The specifications are demanding. The construction demands extraordinary precision. Each column requires 3 concentric pipes, copper outer, nickel inner, with uranium hexafluoride layer just 0.010 inches thick between them, the thickness of 3 sheets of paper. The nickel resists uranium hexafluoride corrosion. The copper conducts heat efficiently. The tiny spacing allows thermal convection to separate isotopes. Any imperfection ruins the column's efficiency. To meet the impossible deadline, H.K. Ferguson uses passenger trains to transport construction materials from suppliers across the country. Normal freight trains are too slow. Operators, electricians, welders work around the clock in 3 shifts. The site along the Clinch River transforms into a forest of 48-foot columns being installed in vertical racks. Welders work by arc light through the night. September 16, 1944, just 69 days after construction began, the first S-50 columns commence operation. The 90-day deadline is beaten by 3 weeks. The plant is still under construction, with operational and construction crews working simultaneously in the same areas. Steam hisses from test connections. Uranium hexafluoride begins flowing through columns while workers install additional racks nearby. The thermal diffusion process proves energy-intensive and expensive, but it works. Enrichment is minimal per stage, but it's consistent and reliable. Meanwhile, K-25's barrier crisis finally breaks. Through mid-1944, Kellex Corporation makes incremental progress on barrier design. A crash production effort produces improved barriers, barely adequate but functional. The barriers don't meet original specifications, but they separate uranium isotopes reliably enough for production use. It's not elegant, it's not optimal, but it works. By late 1944, K-25 begins limited operations. The gaseous diffusion process proves more efficient than electromagnetic separation, but requires feeding through thousands of cascade stages sequentially. The entire system must be hermetically sealed. Any moisture causes violent reactions with uranium hexafluoride. Even microscopic pinhole leaks contaminate the process. Special leak detectors are invented specifically for K-25. The 3 plants begin coordinated operation. S-50's thermal diffusion provides low-level enrichment, less than 2% uranium-235 concentration, up from natural uranium's 0.7%. This slightly enriched material feeds into K-25's gaseous diffusion, which achieves approximately 23% enrichment through thousands of cascade stages. K-25's product then feeds into Y-12's alpha Calutrons for enrichment to approximately 84 to 89% concentration, sufficient for atomic weapons. The integrated system functions, but barely. S-50 consumes enormous electricity for minimal enrichment gain per stage. K-25's barriers require constant maintenance and replacement. They degrade from corrosion and must be swapped out regularly. Y-12's Calutrons demand continuous adjustment by thousands of operators working in perfect coordination. January 1945. The S-50 facility completes installation of all 2,142 columns. The massive thermal diffusion process building stands 522 feet long, 82 feet wide, 75 feet high, a black structure filled with columns arranged in vertical racks reaching toward the ceiling. Spring 1945, the 3-plant integrated system finally produces sufficient enriched uranium for weapon development. Material flows from S-50 through K-25 through Y-12's alpha tracks into beta tracks. Each stage increases uranium-235 concentration incrementally. The process remains inefficient, energy-intensive, and expensive beyond comprehension, but it works. The uranium ships to Los Alamos in specially designed containers, transported by armed convoy. Y-12's peak employment reaches 22,400 workers in May 1945. The Calutron girls continue adjusting dials, monitoring meters, maintaining needles within specified ranges. K-25 employs approximately 12,000 workers managing the gaseous diffusion cascades, maintaining pipes, monitoring for leaks. The mile-long building's interior becomes a maze of pipes, converters, and cascade stages. S-50 operates continuously, feeding both K-25 and Y-12. The 2,142 columns separate uranium isotopes through thermal convection 24 hours daily. By summer 1945, the integrated Oak Ridge system produces weapons-grade uranium-235 ready for shipment to Los Alamos. The race to beat Germany to atomic weapons has been won, though Oak Ridge residents won't know for 2 more months. The decision to build Oak Ridge represented a distinctly American strategic calculation. Industrial capacity and parallel redundancy could overcome technological uncertainty. When the National Academy of Sciences first evaluated uranium enrichment methods in 1941, no single approach appeared clearly superior. Gaseous diffusion showed theoretical promise but lacked experimental validation. British scientists advocated it based on calculations, yet no one had actually produced enriched uranium samples using the method at significant scale. Electromagnetic separation worked in laboratory cyclotrons at Berkeley, but scaling from small experimental devices to industrial production required increases of thousands of times. Gas centrifuge enrichment seemed potentially efficient but needed entirely new engineering development. Thermal diffusion appeared scientifically sound but remained largely theoretical beyond small-scale Navy experiments. Most nations pursuing atomic weapons would have chosen one method, perfected it through systematic research and testing, then constructed production facilities based on proven results. This was the German approach. This was what British scientists initially attempted. This was conventional engineering wisdom. The United States chose differently. Pursue every method simultaneously at industrial scale. Build all facilities concurrently, even before technical problems are solved. If some fail, others might succeed. If multiple succeed, production accelerates dramatically. Accept massive cost and technical redundancy as acceptable trade-offs for speed. Brigadier General Leslie R. Groves embodied this philosophy. A career Army engineer who just finished constructing the Pentagon in 16 months, Groves understood how American industrial might could overwhelm technical obstacles through sheer scale. He'd managed Army construction spending of $8 billion during wartime mobilization, with peak monthly expenditure of $720 million. He knew American production capacity, properly organized and funded, was unmatched globally. Building Oak Ridge's free enrichment plants would cost enormous sums, but less than 6 months of wartime Army construction budget. The potential payoff, atomic weapons before Germany, justified any expense. K-25 construction began June 1943 before engineers solved the barrier problem. The decision represented a calculated gamble, bet that barrier solution would emerge during the building's construction. Build the mile-long 44-acre structure. Install framework for thousands of cascade stages. Prepare hundreds of miles of piping, and trust that scientists would develop workable barriers before the building sat empty and useless. This approach directly contradicted conventional engineering practice. Solve problems before construction, not during, but Groves prioritized speed over certainty. Delay meant potentially losing the race to Germany. Y-12 installed 1,152 Calutrons, despite knowing electromagnetic separation consumed electricity inefficiently. Each Calutron required massive electromagnets wound with thousands of tons of borrowed treasury silver because wartime copper shortages made that metal unavailable. The electromagnetic process demanded constant operator monitoring, hence recruiting 10,000 young women to adjust dials continuously. Compared to theoretical gaseous diffusion efficiency, electromagnetic separation was brute force technology, but it worked immediately while gaseous diffusion remained unproven. S-50's thermal diffusion provided minimal enrichment gain per stage, but could be built quickly using proven Navy technology. When Manhattan Project scientists learned of Abelson's Philadelphia pilot plant in June 1944, they recognized thermal diffusion couldn't produce weapons-grade uranium directly, but it could provide low-enriched feed material for K-25 and Y-12, accelerating their processes. Groves approved S-50 construction despite its inefficiency because it solved an immediate problem. The town itself embodied the same philosophy. Rather than military barracks, Oak Ridge provided houses, schools, theaters, churches, normalcy in the midst of extraordinary circumstances. Workers would be more productive living in communities with families. Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill designed pleasant neighborhoods with curved streets and recreation facilities. The segregation of black workers into inferior hutments revealed the era's racial hierarchy. Even in a model city built from scratch with unlimited resources, conventional social structures persisted. Black construction workers lived in one-room shacks in segregated Gamble Valley, while white workers occupied Semesto houses with running water and electricity. This American approach fundamentally differed from other nations' atomic programs. German scientists pursued theoretical perfection. Their uranium project emphasized research, calculation, optimal methods. Werner Heisenberg's team sought the single best approach through theoretical physics. When approaches seemed inefficient, they abandoned them. The German program remained relatively small, research-focused. British researchers sought the single best method through careful analysis. When wartime bombing made British construction impractical, they partnered with Americans but assumed one primary approach would dominate. The British were shocked when Americans built all three methods simultaneously. Soviet intelligence infiltrated Oak Ridge and reported American methods to Moscow. Soviet scientists couldn't believe Americans were pursuing three separate, expensive approaches concurrently. It seemed wasteful, contradictory to scientific method. Yet Soviet spies like George Koval transmitted technical details that informed post-war Soviet atomic development. The philosophy proved correct, though at extraordinary cost. Y-12 alone cost $478 million, K-25 cost $512 million, S-50 added tens of millions more. Combined with town construction, Oak Ridge consumed over $1 billion, approximately $15 billion in current dollars. But the parallel approaches guaranteed success. When K-25's barriers failed for months, Y-12 continued operating. When Y-12 produced insufficient quantities, S-50 and K-25 supplemented production. When all three operated in coordinated sequence, uranium enrichment accelerated dramatically. American industrial philosophy, build everything simultaneously except redundancy costs, defined Oak Ridge's success. The human cost of Oak Ridge's success emerged not in construction casualties, but in the crushing psychological weight of secrecy and the moral burden that materialized August 6, 1945. Security at Oak Ridge operated at unprecedented levels for American civilian communities. Every worker signed security declarations explicitly invoking the Espionage Act of 1917, making violations federal crimes punishable by 10 years imprisonment. Army intelligence officers in civilian clothes monitored conversations in cafeterias, dormitories, recreation areas. They posed as workers. They listened to gossip. Mail was censored, both incoming and outgoing. Phone calls were restricted and monitored. Workers who used prohibited terms, words like uranium, atom, diffusion, received termination notices within hours, escorted through gates with armed guards. The surveillance created pervasive paranoia. Workers learned not to ask questions, not to discuss work even with spouses, not to speculate about purpose. Neighbors might be informants, roommates might report conversations. Safety lay in silence. Ruth Huddleston operated Y-12 Calutrons for 18 months without understanding her task. Each 8-hour shift followed identical routine. Adjust this dial, keep that needle centered, watch the gauge. The monotony was deliberate. Understanding was forbidden. When she asked supervisors what the equipment produced, they told her only that it helped win the war. Thousands of young women experienced identical isolation. Recruited from East Tennessee communities as recent high school graduates, they operated sophisticated electromagnetic equipment without comprehension. Gladys Owens, Willie Baker, Dot Wilkinson, names now recorded in Oak Ridge history, sat at control panels adjusting knobs for months, separating uranium-235 from uranium-238 atom by atom, creating fuel for atomic weapons completely unaware. At K-25, Colleen Black spent shifts testing endless miles of pipe for microscopic leaks. She knew uranium hexafluoride gas flowed through the pipes, the chemical smell was unmistakable, and safety training mentioned the gas's corrosive properties. But she didn't know why uranium needed processing. Leak detection seemed mundane, repetitive. Walk the pipe runs, test connections, mark defects for repair, repeat. The K-25 building's vastness made the work surreal, bicycling through mile-long corridors checking pipes whose purpose remained classified. S-50 operators understood even less. The thermal diffusion columns were simple mechanically: steam in, cooling water out, check temperatures. The work seemed industrial maintenance rather than atomic research. The secrecy extended beyond individual plants. Y-12 workers didn't know K-25 existed despite living 11 miles away. Each facility operated behind additional security perimeters. Workers needed specific badges for specific areas. Different colors granted different access. Children in Oak Ridge schools learned not to ask parents about work. Teachers avoided dangerous topics. Sermons in churches carefully avoided references to atomic physics or uranium. The entire community developed unspoken understanding: don't discuss it. Then August 6, 1945, shattered the silence. The Knoxville News-Sentinel headline, "Atomic Bomb Rocks Japan," appeared mid-morning. Workers on night shifts read it leaving plants. Day shift workers read it during breaks. By afternoon, everyone in Oak Ridge knew. The newspaper articles explained everything. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima contained uranium-235 enriched at Oak Ridge through electromagnetic separation, gaseous diffusion, and thermal diffusion. Y-12, K-25, and S-50 had all contributed to Little Boy's fuel. The psychological impact varied dramatically. Some workers felt relief the war was ending. Husbands and boyfriends stationed overseas could come home. Others felt pride. Their monotonous work had contributed to victory. But many felt horror. Ruth Huddleston felt both relief and horror. Her boyfriend was stationed overseas. The war ending meant he'd survive. But her dial adjustments had contributed to over 100,000 deaths in Hiroshima. "I found out the day after they bombed Japan that we had a part in it," she reflected years later. "We were producing uranium. I felt like I had a part in helping end the war, but I kept thinking I had a part in killing those people. That's the part that bothered me." Many Oak Ridge workers felt pride. They'd helped defeat Japan, saved American lives that would have been lost in invasion, ended 6 years of global war. The victory justified the secrecy and sacrifice. Others struggled with guilt. The devastation descriptions from Hiroshima, fires consuming neighborhoods, radiation sickness, victims vaporized, made abstract war into concrete horror. Knowing their monotonous daily tasks had enabled such destruction created moral burden many carried for decades. Still others felt betrayed. The government had recruited them for war work, kept them isolated under security threats, used them as unwitting participants in creating mass death weapons. The lack of informed consent troubled some profoundly. "But then I knew that in war there's killing," Huddleston continued, "and I had to weigh that over and over in my mind to tell myself that, and I accepted it. I still think about it." By August 14, 1945, when Japan surrendered, Oak Ridge's mission was complete. The secret city had succeeded. The moral reckoning had only begun. When Japan surrendered August 14th, Oak Ridge had proven that democratic societies could maintain operational security at massive industrial scale. Not perfect security, Soviet intelligence penetrated the Manhattan Project, but sufficient security to prevent public knowledge until weapons deployment accomplished strategic objectives. Oak Ridge demonstrated that American industrial capacity could substitute for scientific elegance. The United States lacked breakthrough innovations. British scientists pioneered gaseous diffusion theory. Ernest Lawrence adapted Berkeley cyclotrons. Navy researchers developed thermal diffusion. American contribution wasn't innovation, but industrialization. Oak Ridge established precedents that shaped Cold War nuclear infrastructure. The model, secret cities built around classified facilities, repeated at Los Alamos, Hanford, Savannah River, Rocky Flats, Paducah, Portsmouth. The moral questions remain unresolved. Workers who built the bomb didn't choose that role knowingly. They were recruited for jobs helping the war effort, then discovered their work had created unprecedented destructive power. Some felt pride, others felt guilt, most felt both. The ethical weight of creating weapons without informed consent continues provoking debate about scientific responsibility and government secrecy. Oak Ridge National Laboratory continues today as a major scientific research facility, focusing on materials science, supercomputing, clean energy. Y-12 remains operational as a nuclear weapons component manufacturing facility. The K-25 site has been demolished and redeveloped. The footprint is preserved as part of Manhattan Project National Historical Park. The mud has been paved over. The temporary houses mostly replaced, the fences removed. Oak Ridge incorporated as a normal Tennessee city in 1959, population stabilizing around 27,000. Former residents still gather annually, sharing memories of the secret city where they lived history without knowing it. But the lesson persists. When national will and industrial might focus completely on single objectives, extraordinary things become possible. An entire city built in less than 2 years. 3 unprecedented industrial processes scaled from laboratory to weapons production. 75,000 people maintaining secrecy sufficient to conceal atomic weapons development. Final accounting. Land acquired, 59,000 acres. Average $46.86 per acre. Over 3,000 families displaced. Peak population, 75,000 residents in 1945. Infrastructure, 300 miles of roads, 55 miles of railroad, 10 schools, 7 theaters. Y-12, 1,152 Calutrons, 14,700 tons of silver borrowed, 22,400 peak workers, $478 million cost. K-25, half mile by 1,000 feet. 44 acres under roof, 25,000 construction workers, $512 million cost. S-50, 2,142 columns, 69-day construction, operational September 1944. Power consumption, 1/7 of all U.S. electricity in 1945. Result, Little Boy uranium-235, 84 to 89% enrichment, August 6, 1945. Whether such concentrated power represents human progress or a Faustian bargain remains the question Oak Ridge poses to every generation. The secret city proved America could build anything. What we should build remains our choice.